They chopped off their long hair, shortened their skirts, and for the first time in history, their votes mattered. These were the women of the Roaring Twenties. But at the same time, they were dancing the Charleston. The ghosts of World War I's trenches still lingered, and the law of Prohibition was unintentionally creating a brutal empire of organized crime. Prosperity and decay, freedom and fear. Which was the true face of America 100 years ago? Let's find out together. If you find this journey fascinating, don't forget to share and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. This photograph from December 1921 isn't just a line of cars, it's a revolution on wheels. The man pictured is William C. Durant, founder of Durant Motors, and he's not just inspecting machines. He's witnessing the American dream taking shape, a car within reach of every family. Thanks to mass production technology, the automobile was no longer a luxury for the wealthy, but a symbol of freedom that would completely reshape how Americans lived and worked. Listen, this isn't just music. It's the very heartbeat of the Roaring Twenties. Kid Ory's Creole Band, pictured here, were pioneers taking the improvisational sound of New Orleans and turning it into the soul of a generation. Initially seen as rebellious, jazz quickly became a declaration of freedom, a rhythm that let people forget the scars of war and dance toward a promising future. On the streets of New York, the law appeared to be winning. This was Prohibition in action, a noble experiment intended to completely eliminate alcohol. But instead of creating a more moral nation, it unintentionally gave birth to an era of speakeasies, bootleggers, and criminal empires. Every barrel publicly destroyed like this was just a single drop, while an entire ocean of illegal liquor continued to flow in the shadows. A bar without a single drop of alcohol. Instead, there are books. This was the scene at the Majestic Hotel in New York, a creative solution to Prohibition. They transformed a space once dedicated to revelry and social gatherings into a quiet haven of knowledge. This photo doesn't just show business adaptation, it reflects a social shift where public spaces were being redefined in the most unexpected ways. This was a spectacle for the public, illegal liquor being poured away. But the irony is, every drop that flowed into this drain was watering the seeds of organized crime. Prohibition created a massive black market, and figures like Al Capone seized the opportunity, building criminal empires on bootlegging and becoming the sole suppliers for a nation's thirst for alcohol. Before there was sound, this is how Hollywood created magic. Director Rex Ingram, megaphone in hand, is shaping a scene for the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. In this world without dialogue, stories were told through intense expressions and dramatic gestures. It was this film that launched Rudolph Valentino into superstardom, creating a cinematic heartthrob who offered the public a dream world to escape into. Behind the parties and the liberation lay a stark reality. In the 1920s, the journey of motherhood was a life-or-death gamble. For every 125 births, one mother would never get to see her child grow up. This image of a dedicated nurse conceals a desperate fight against risks we have nearly forgotten today. While America was roaring with progress, the first cry of a newborn was often accompanied by the deepest of fears. In 1920, the 19th Amendment changed the face of American politics forever. This photograph captures more than just a vote. It's the moment 26 million women held power in their hands for the first time. Their ballots didn't just elect politicians. They became tools to fight for fairer wages, better working conditions, and rights within the family. This was the moment they truly began to write the rules for themselves. When women got the vote, their children began to survive. This photograph isn't just a routine checkup. It represents a quiet public health revolution. Thanks to the women's ballot, hygiene campaigns were pushed forward, helping to drop child mortality rates by as much as 15% a year. The fight against invisible killers like diphtheria and meningitis had found new heroes, mothers and wives with the right to vote. These children in this classroom were the direct beneficiaries of one of the biggest changes of the 1920s. When women gained the right to vote, public education was no longer overlooked. In the South, spending per student increased by as much as a third. This wasn't just money for buildings, it was a statement. The future of these children was a worthy investment, and the voices of mothers were finally being heard in the halls of power. An entirely new world was being whispered through these headphones. At the start of the decade, the radio was a novelty, but by the late 20s, it was in over 12 million homes. For the first time in history, music, news, and thrilling sports broadcasts poured out of a wooden box, weaving their way into every living room and connecting a vast nation over the airwaves, creating an unprecedented shared culture. This wasn't just a car, it was the average American's ticket to freedom. Thanks to Henry Ford's assembly line, the price of a Model T in 1924 was just $260. For the first time in history, ordinary families using installment plans could afford a safer and more comfortable vehicle that would completely reshape their lives and create the concept of the road trip. As millions of Americans got behind the wheel, they quickly discovered a major problem. Their freedom was limited by dusty, unpaved roads. This photograph captures that reality. In response to this new demand for mobility, Congress passed the Federal Highway Act of 1921, providing federal aid to build the first highways. This was the foundational stone, the first step toward a connected America that would reshape commerce and travel for decades to come. This may look like a victory for the law, but in reality, it's a portrait of a massive underground economy. The 18th Amendment banned the sale of liquor, but it couldn't ban the people's thirst. The result? The federal government lost a staggering $11 billion in tax revenue, while the black market flourished. Bootleggers and organized crime syndicates profited handsomely, turning Prohibition into their golden opportunity. After the war, Americans sought release on the dance floor. Energetic dances like the Charleston pictured here became the language of freedom. But that joy had a dark side. After the economic crash of 1929, dance marathons morphed from fun competitions into grotesque displays of desperation, where couples would dance to the point of exhaustion for days on end just to win the prize money. Hollywood in the 1920s wasn't just a place to make movies, it was a factory. This was the birth of the studio system, where the major studios didn't just own the cameras and the sets. They owned the talent. Actors, directors, and writers were all bound by exclusive contracts. Independent theaters were forced to buy films in packages, the good with the bad, creating a monopoly that held complete control over the American dream. This wasn't just a family listening to the radio. They were part of history. The 1927 Rose Bowl football game between Stanford and Alabama became the first nationwide broadcast in the United States. For the first time, from the East Coast to the West, millions of people shared a single experience, holding their breath with every play. This moment ushered in the era of network radio, spreading culture and news faster than ever before. This family gazes at the New York skyline, a symbol of hope. But But during the 1920s, a wave of anti-immigrant and anti-communist fear swept the nation. The Immigration Act of 1924 was passed, establishing a strict quota system and banning almost all immigrants from Asia. For countless families like this one, America's golden door was no longer wide open. It was being coldly shut, leaving dreams stranded on the shore. This wasn't just a hairstyle, it was a statement. Inspired by F. Scott Fitzgerald's short story, the bob became the ultimate symbol of the flapper, the modern woman. Cutting off traditional long hair was a deliberate act of rebellion, a blunt rejection of old-fashioned norms. It signified independence, audacity, and a spirit of freedom that was surging through a new generation of women. In 1920, for the first time in history, the census revealed that more than half of all Americans lived in urban areas. This photograph isn't just of skyscrapers, it's the destination for millions of dreams. People left behind quiet farms and rural towns for the roar of the factory and the ever-glowing city lights. This was a massive migration that completely reshaped America's identity, forging it into a nation of modern metropolises. They balanced on steel beams, building the skyline of modern America. But as the skyscrapers rose, the rights of these very workers were being torn down. The 1920s saw labor unions lose their power, and in 1923, the Supreme Court even struck down the minimum wage. They were building the American dream for everyone except, it seemed, for themselves. This is Wall Street, the epicenter of America's economic roar. By 1929, the stock market had soared to 6 times its value, creating immense fortunes. But here's the staggering truth. Fewer than 1% of Americans actually owned stock. So while the headlines trumpeted prosperity, for the other 99%, this was simply a lavish party they were never invited to. This image isn't just a long line of cars. It's the beginning of America's great love affair with the automobile. Throughout the 1920s, the number of cars tripled, reaching 26 million by 1929. And the soul of this revolution was Henry Ford's Model T, which accounted for nearly half of all sales. It turned the dream of personal mobility into a reality for millions. In the 1920s, electricity was no longer a luxury. The number of homes with power nearly doubled, and with it came an army of new servants: refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, and washing machines. For the woman in this photo, the refrigerator was a form of liberation. But this revolution of convenience was mostly an urban one, leaving the vast majority of rural America in the dark for years to come. In the late 1920s, it seemed the entire country stopped to listen to them. Amos and Andy was a radio phenomenon, telling the humorous story of 2 black men. But here was the secret. The 2 voice actors were white. The show was incredibly popular, but it was built on deep-seated racial stereotypes, shaping how millions of people viewed the African American community and leaving behind a legacy that is both complex and troubling. This was not a secret gathering. This was 1925, and over 50,000 Ku Klux Klan members were marching in broad daylight in Washington, D.C. By exploiting fears of immigrants and communism, the group cloaked its bigotry in the language of morality and patriotism. This image exposes a terrifying truth of the Roaring Twenties. Beneath the glittering surface, racial hatred and violence remained a formidable force. For decades, Sears came to Americans through the mailbox, with its legendary catalog. But in 1924, thanks to the automobile, Americans could finally drive to Sears. This was their first retail store in Chicago, a revolution in shopping. For the first time, customers could touch the washing machine, inspect the housewares before buying. It was the beginning of a massive retail empire with over 300 stores in just a few years. This truck wasn't just delivering bread, it was delivering a revolution. In 1921, Wonder Bread made its debut, and with it came a game-changing invention: pre-sliced bread. Suddenly, making a sandwich was faster than ever. This was the dawn of the convenience food era, joined by other icons like popsicles in 1923 and Kool-Aid in 1927, which would reshape the American palate for the next 100 years. This photograph, featuring First Lady Florence Harding, captures the birth of a sweet tradition. In 1922, the Girl Scouts began baking simple sugar cookies from a recipe in their magazine. They then went door to door, selling them for about 30 cents a dozen. This small act launched a massive fundraising program that would teach millions of girls their first lessons in business. Before the medicine in this small box existed, a diabetes diagnosis was a death sentence. The only treatment was a diet that led to starvation. But in 1921, a monumental discovery changed everything. Scientists successfully extracted insulin, and in 1922, a child became the first person to be saved by it. Amid the roar of the Jazz Age, this was perhaps the greatest sound of all, the whisper of hope for millions. While America was dancing, a silent killer called diphtheria was rampant. In 1921 alone, it claimed the lives of nearly 16,000 people, most of them children. But in 1923, a new weapon arrived. The shot this little girl is receiving isn't just medicine. It's a shield that would protect an entire generation, marking one of public health's greatest victories and banishing one of every family's greatest fears into the past. How could Americans afford to buy so much? The answer lies in a revolutionary idea: buy now, pay later. Department stores and car dealerships began offering installment plans, allowing people to own goods they could never have afforded with cash. By 1927, nearly 2/3 of all new cars were purchased on credit. The economy boomed, but consumer debt also doubled, planting the seeds for an uncertain future. In a world accelerating with cars and radios, the way Americans read the news had to change. Time magazine, founded in 1923, was the answer. With its short, concise articles, it became the information handbook for a nation on the move. It created the Man of the Year concept, honoring aviator Charles Lindbergh as its first. This was the birth of modern news journalism. Every woman desired the shimmer of silk, but not everyone could afford it. Then came Rayon. Nicknamed artificial silk, this new fabric brought the luxurious, shimmery look of silk to the masses. Thanks to its affordable price, ordinary women could now dress in the latest high fashion, shimmery styles of the Jazz Age without needing a fortune. After World War I, America's skies came alive. Former military pilots with surplus planes and endless courage created a new form of entertainment: barnstorming. They performed aerial acrobatics, walked on the wings as seen here, and gave remote rural towns their very first chance to fly. It was a reckless and thrilling craze, a short but unforgettable chapter before safety regulations were put in place. Air travel had taken off, but it was anything but glamorous. Forget giant jets. In the 1920s, passengers sat in cramped cabins, flying at low altitudes at speeds of only about 100 miles per hour. The journey was painfully long, with constant stops for refueling, all amidst deafening noise and biting cold. This wasn't luxury, this was a true adventure. This wasn't just a roadside bookstand. This was the front line of a cultural war. In 1925 in Tennessee, the Scopes monkey trial erupted when a teacher was accused of teaching evolution. The sign, "Hell in the High School," summed it up perfectly. Was modern science leading humanity away from God? The entire nation watched, holding its breath, and the clash between traditional faith and modern science that began here still echoes today. And so, the curtain falls on the Roaring Twenties. Through the lens of these old photographs, we've witnessed a decade dancing on the very edge of the Great Depression. It was a symphony of contradictions, with the high notes of freedom and automobiles, punctuated by the chilling low notes of bigotry and injustice. Each photograph is a door to the past, a forgotten story that deserves to be told. If you believe that too, please share this video so these memories don't fade, and subscribe to join us on our next journey into history.